Hey everybody. So this is the second video in our lesson on the writing process, drafting, specifically looking at paragraph development. So the first video covered the PowerPoint and the beginning of the handout on paragraph development. We looked at, the sort of the definition of a paragraph, right? That, every paragraph should deal with, one idea, right? Or a topic, because we do call it a topic sentence at the beginning of the paragraph. But it's not the topic of your whole essay, it's just the topic of that paragraph. So every time you switch topics, you switch to a new paragraph. But all of those topics fall under the larger umbrella of your essay topic, your thesis statement, right? So you've got that bigger topic there in your introduction, and the topics within your body paragraphs are all serving to highlight or emphasize or prove that thesis statement. So we looked at the passage from Edges, that is originally broken up into two paragraphs, and we talked about where that break should have occurred, thinking about the rules of paragraphs and those elements that we learned about in the PowerPoint. All right, so a paragraph begins with a transition and a topic sentence. The transition takes us from the previous paragraph to this new one. Why? How are they connected? Why are we going from A to B, right? And then the topic sentence announces the specific topic of that new paragraph. Then we have our supporting sentences and our point sentence at the end. So using what we know about the elements of a paragraph, we were able to figure out where that larger passage should have been broken up into two paragraphs. So that was fairly easy, not that difficult to figure out where the break should occur. What we're talking about with that little exercise is paragraph focus. The focus of your paragraph should be precise and crystal clear. You don't ever want to muddy the waters within the body of the paragraph. Whatever the topic is supposed to be, that's what the paragraph should consist of. No more, no less. All right. So in that passage from Edges, the first paragraph was talking about the pen vendors, right? And then the second paragraph was talking about the carnies. Both of those topics relate to the author's more general topic of the county fairs, right? We were able to easily enough figure out where the break was. So, that was good news for us. But what happens when the paragraph you're looking at has no focus? In that exercise with the passage from Edges, both paragraphs were totally focused. We just smushed them together for the sake of trying to figure out where the break should occur. But you're not always going to have it that easy. When you're writing your own piece, your paragraphs can get very muddy and out of focus. So we have an example in the handout, another example about a guy named Gus. And this paragraph is slightly out of focus, right? So thinking about the topic sentence of this paragraph, try to figure out where the paragraph loses focus. So the paragraph starts with Gus, a 28-year-old jock, has to be the most egotistical person I have ever had the misfortune of meeting. Okay, that's our topic sentence. What do we learn from that topic sentence? We learn that this paragraph is going to be about Gus and how the author, who I've ever had the misfortune of meeting, there's a good chance that this paragraph is going to talk about the first time they met Gus. So keeping that in mind, that the focus of this paragraph is how the narrator met Gus, who happens to be very egotistical. Keeping that in mind, do we lose focus anywhere? Right? So it goes on. However, Has to be the most egotistical person I have ever had the misfortune of meeting. From the moment he walked in the clinic, I could tell he thought himself superior to everyone else. Does that sentence match up with what our topic is supposed to be about? Gus being egotistical first time we meet him? Yes. I had gotten this job at the clinic through a friend of my mother's. Does that sentence fit with our topic of egotistical Gus and meeting him? I don't think so. Although physical therapy was not my intended career, I thought I would get valuable experience dealing with the public. Does that have anything to do with us meeting egotistical Gus for the first time? Not really. Anyway, Gus came into the waiting room and introduced himself to the receptionist by telling her what a great lover he was. So does that relate to the topic sentence, meeting egotistical Gus? Yes. After boasting about his car and his ability as a skydiver, Gus excused himself to comb his hair and preen before the mirror. That definitely fits in with our topic of meeting egotistical Gus. Then, as luck would have it, I found he had been assigned to me for his therapy. So yes, that also relates back to the topic and kind of lets us know that this first little paragraph about Gus has drawn to an end. You can kind of tell that he's been assigned to her for physical therapy. Now we're about to go into a new paragraph where more of the story starts to happen. So, but there were two sentences in there that really didn't fall under that topic that was announced in the first sentence. The part where she says, I had gotten this job at the clinic through a friend of my mother's. Although physical therapy was not my intended career, I thought I would get valuable experience dealing with the public. Those two sentences are out of focus. They make the whole paragraph out of focus. It might not seem like much, but those two sentences could really throw your reader off track. You know, here you are setting them up with this expectation of meeting Gus, this super egotistical guy, and then you suddenly throw in this information about why, you know, how you got the job and why you took the job. That can throw your reader off track, and then they lose their train of thought and they can't really make the jump back to Gus. We know that those two sentences don't belong, not only because they don't fit with the topic sentence that we announced, but then immediately afterwards, the author says, anyway, Gus came into the waiting room, and it's like that anyway is a really good indicator that even the author realized she got off track, right? We do that. Very common when we're telling stories, especially in conversation, and especially when you first draft, right? But that's where the revision part comes in, and if your paragraph is not in focus the first time you draft it, that's why we go back and revise. So in this case, we have to decide what to do with those two sentences that make the paragraph out of focus. So really only a couple questions you need to ask yourself. Maybe only one question. The first question is this information essential to the overall essay? Does this information about how and why she took the job, is it important to the overall essay? If the answer is no, you take it out and you forget about it. You move on. You just completely take those two sentences out, delete them, you're done. But if the answer to the first question is, yeah, they actually are kind of important to the overall essay, well then, you need to treat that topic to its own paragraph or more if necessary. And then you have to decide, well, where does it make sense in the essay? Should it be in the beginning, towards the middle? You know, where is this information best placed? And then you create a paragraph or however many you need to develop that idea. But it cannot stay in this paragraph. Those two sentences do not belong. So whatever the answer ends up being, one thing remains for sure. They have to go. You got to take them out of this paragraph. So that was actually not super difficult, right? I think the biggest part with that example is really understanding how important it is to take those 2 sentences out. I think we can understand that's where she gets off track, but we might think to ourselves, it's only 2 sentences, and then she gets back on track. Like, what's the big deal? It is a big deal. Your reader really can lose their train of thought and not be able to refocus their attention, right? So the next example, however, is not so easy. If you go down to the next paragraph example, we have, it's a very muddy, murky paragraph. Let's look at the first sentence. We'll look at the first 2 sentences. Just in case the first sentence is a transitional sentence and the second sentence is the topic sentence, we'll read them both first and hopefully get an idea of what this paragraph's topic is. Murder is a serious crime. Every day you can look in a paper and read about someone being murdered. All right, so definitely safe in saying that the topic of this paragraph is murder and why it's a serious crime, or proving that it is a serious crime, maybe. So we'll move on. I think that failure to apply the death penalty is a major factor in the increase of deaths. Wait a minute. We were talking about murder and how it's a serious crime, and then now all of a sudden we have switched to the death penalty and why a failure of using a death penalty has led to an increase of deaths. It doesn't say increase of murder, just increase of deaths. A person can now murder someone and be pretty certain he will not be executed. I think that if a person kills someone, he deserves to die, except in times of war or accidental death. Okay, so now we're not talking about murder. And maybe indirectly, but we have definitely moved on to include something else in this paragraph. Execution, death penalty, times of war, accidental death. After all, the person he murdered didn't want to die. With proper enforcement of the death penalty, there would be fewer murders. So he's trying to bring it back on track. He's trying to tie all this together, but that was a lot of smaller topics all smushed into those first, 4 or 5 sentences. A person would be less likely to commit murder if he knows he can be executed for his crime. If the death penalty is not enforced, there is but one choice: carry a gun. Wait a minute. That's not even... We have completely abandoned the topic of murder as a serious crime. Where are we at now? All of a sudden we're talking about, maybe concealed carry, just carrying a gun in general. That way, if your life is threatened, you get to kill him before he gets to kill you. Maybe. The law works 2 ways. If he kills you, he goes to jail. And if you kill him, you get off on self-defense. Do we have any proof that any of that is true? What do the statistics actually show us? There would be fewer murders if everyone carried a gun. Not many people would try to kill you when they know you carry a gun. Are you sure about that? There's so many problems with this paragraph. Before I even come back to the focus of the paragraph, this person has spent a lot of time sharing these thoughts with us, making these claims, these assertions, and not offered one bit of evidence to support it. So that in and of itself is super problematic for any paragraph. So you might think, okay, well then all they need to do is just go in and cite some sources so that they have the supporting evidence to make the paragraph more believable. No, not yet. You need to clean up the paragraph first, and there is no easy solution to this one. It's not like it's just 2 sentences misplaced right in the middle that need to be taken out, like with the Gus paragraph. No, this one is all over the place. It feels like a free write, like a brainstorming, a pre-writing activity. where the author just started writing about what was originally their topic, but it led them to different things. Seems like there's a lot of emotional venting happening in this little passage right here. It is not a focused paragraph in any way, shape, or form, and it's not going to be as easy as just taking a few sentences out. This needs to be completely fleshed out so that the author can figure out exactly what he or she wants to write about. And that is why the pre-writing stage is so important, and why the revision stage will become so important. We will talk about that next week. You know, I get this sometimes, students turning in a final draft. Certainly I see it in rough drafts, but even sometimes in the final drafts, I will come across paragraphs like this. And more than likely, that student either didn't turn in a rough draft or didn't have a complete rough draft, and these problem paragraphs happened after the rough draft was reviewed by someone. But I can tell that when I get a paragraph like this, that the person did not spend enough time in the planning stages, in the getting started and planning stages, that they did not do any of the pre-writing activities. They did not focus in, narrow in on a topic. They did not think about the main points that they were going to use. They didn't make sure that they were being specific and not too big with their topic. And they didn't do any of the draft, like the revision, the drafting and the revision. They just typed something up and handed it in. You have to just start over with this. There's really not going to be much of this original paragraph that remains. It's not going to look anything like this. So you really, it's good to know that this paragraph is totally out of focus. It's good to know that we would have to start from scratch basically and go through each of the ideas that are introduced in this paragraph and figure out if, are we dealing with one larger complex topic and each of these ideas are like main points for that topic? Or did we start with this idea of murder being a serious crime, but it actually led us to another topic entirely? Maybe what we really want to write our essay on is concealed carry laws. It actually is going to end up having not much to do with murder at all. So that's why the brainstorming activities are important, the pre-writing activities, because if they would have done this in the beginning of their process, they would have known already that they weren't really wanting to write about murder. They were really wanting to write about concealed carry. And then they could have drafted an essay based on that topic and probably had a little less work to do at this stage. So it's good to know that it's out of focus. It's good to know that there's a lot of work to be done with this paragraph. But if you understand the writing process and you use the writing process, and if you understand the rules of paragraph development, one of which is focus, then hopefully you can avoid this problem in the first place. Hopefully what you'll end up with, if you do have some work to do on your paragraphs, hopefully it's more akin to the Gus paragraph than it is to this one, because this one is a lot of work. That one, the Gus paragraphs like that, not so time consuming and not so complicated to revise and make better. So I really hope that learning about the elements of paragraphs will help us avoid having it completely muddied and murky like that paragraph was. So paragraph focus, right? Make sure that whatever the topic of the paragraph is, that all of the sentences contained within it directly relate to that topic. And if they don't relate to that topic, why are they there? If you cannot come up with a good enough explanation for why they still belong in that paragraph, then it's probably because they don't belong in that paragraph. So once we know exactly what the paragraph is going to be about, because I always tell students, write the paragraph first. Make sure the paragraph is focused first. Then create a topic sentence, right? You can do it the opposite way. You can create a topic sentence first and then fill in the supporting sentences, making sure that they tie into that topic. But I always tell students, you know, once we write a topic sentence, sometimes we feel very like locked in to that topic, and it hinders our creative process. And if you save the topic sentence until after you've written the supporting sentences, then you just create a topic sentence that exactly matches what you've done in the paragraph. And so you stand a better chance of the topic sentence and the supporting sentences matching up directly. You do it however works best for you, but if you are sure that your paragraph is in focus, that is a huge step in the right direction. We are now going to turn our attention to topic sentences and do a little bit of practice with it. So we learned from the PowerPoint that topic sentences function a little bit like a thesis statement, right? They announce the specific focused topic of your paragraph. That sentence is typically the first or second sentence of the paragraph. If it's the second sentence of your paragraph, that should only be because the first sentence is a transitional sentence, linking the new paragraph to the one that came before. Most of the time, though, you will see that transition as a part of the topic sentence. They're done together. So the topic sentence is typically the first sentence of the paragraph. You want it to be specific. You know, you don't want it to be this vague general idea of what the paragraph would be about. Just like your thesis statement is supposed to be super sharp and precise, your topic sentence should be pretty sharp as well. So they don't necessarily come easy. They take some practice. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of paragraphs that are missing their topic sentences. In this case, we're lucky enough that we have some options below the paragraph. So we can choose from the 4 options below it which sentence would function best as the topic sentence for that particular paragraph. So in the first section of Let's Practice, the first paragraph is about Mexican folk dances, okay? So it's missing the topic sentence, and the supporting sentences say, men often wear a Mexican cowboy outfit, which consists of a tight-fitting black suit with silver trim. They wear large hats called sombreros. Sometimes the men wear peasant garb, a white cotton shirt and trousers with a colorful scarf around their necks. Women dance in peasant blouses and full colorful skirts. They often have many colorful ribbons and lace sewn on the sleeves, bodices, and hems of their costumes. Okay, so I think we could probably come up with a good topic sentence for this on our own, but let's look at the options. Many different steps are used in folk dancing around the world, including skips, hops, slides, and steps. That is clearly not the correct choice because we know that this paragraph has nothing to do with the steps of the dance, right? Not to mention, this only talks about folk dancing around the world. We know that this paragraph is devoted specifically to Mexican folk dancing, right? The folk dances of Mexico have originated among indigenous tribes long before the arrival of the Spanish explorers. I think some people might think that that would be an okay topic sentence because it at least, mentions Mexican folk dancing. But that's too vague. It does not hit on the actual topic of this paragraph. The paragraph is not about where or how they originated. Right. Folk dances may be performed for many different occasions, such as weddings, festivals, preparations for war, or celebrations of victory. I think a lot of people might think that that one would be an okay topic sentence, right? It's a very general mention of folk dances. We don't want it to be too general. We want it to be more specific so that we know what the supporting sentences are going to talk about. So our fourth option says, Mexican folk dances are traditional communal dances in which the dancers wear traditional costumes. That one specifically mentions Mexican folk dancing, and it specifically mentions what the dancers wear, which is what the supporting sentences go on to explain. So for this paragraph, option D is definitely the best option. The second example is a paragraph about the New York City subway system, right? So we're missing the topic sentence. The supporting sentences go on to say, the subway system is an intricate network of train lines that run underneath the city, linking all the major neighborhoods to each other. By using the subway, millions of people can get around New York City each day without adding to the traffic of already crowded streets. Visitors to New York City find that it is a convenient way to travel around the city and see the sights. Each train can quickly move thousands of people across the city in just a few minutes at only $1.50 per ride. Imagine how bad traffic in New York City would be without the subway. Okay, so let's look at our options. The subway is vital to having efficient transportation in New York City. Okay, we're talking about the subway, talking about efficient transportation, specifically in New York City. That might be our winner right there. But let's check the other ones and, if anything, figure out why they won't work as the topic sentence. There are millions of people in New York City, making efficient movement of traffic an important concern. This one is close. A lot of people might think that this is the correct answer, that it should be used as the topic sentence. But the problem is that the paragraph is about the subway. And this topic sentence, although it hits on some of the other elements that are discussed in the paragraph, it doesn't mention the subway. We have to let our readers know in that first topic sentence that the rest of the paragraph is going to be about the New York City subway system, right? And this one doesn't do that. The first subway line was opened in New York City in 1904. People might think that that would be an okay topic sentence. It mentions the subway. It's kind of a general introduction to the subway system. But that's the problem. Our paragraph is not about an introduction to the subway system. We're not talking about when it was first opened, the history of it. So that one is not going to work either. New York City is full of great tourist sites and neighborhoods for people to visit. We do mention the tourists in the paragraph, but that's not the focus of the paragraph. I think that first option, letter A, is still the best one. The subway is vital to having efficient transportation in New York City. Everything that follows directly relates back to that sentence. So we're going to skip number 3. I want to take a look at number 4, right? This paragraph is about World War II, something specific about World War II. Let's take a look at this one. Missing the topic sentence, supporting sentences go on to say, during the war, the Allies were in desperate need of a code that the enemy could not decipher. In order to transmit top-secret messages, the U.S. Army enlisted the help of Navajo soldiers. Natives of the American Southwest, the Navajo have a unique tongue. No other people in the world speak a language with similar sounds, grammar, or syntax. It would be impossible for any non-Navajo to know what was being said, especially German or Japanese spy. The Allies won several key battles as a result of having Navajo communications officers. The Axis spies never managed to decipher what these Navajo code talkers were saying. Whew. So it is about World War II, but it is specifically about the Navajo having a unique language, and that's why they were an asset to the Allies. Okay, so the Navajo are a special people with a language unlike any other. That is part of what the paragraph is about, that the Navajo have this unique language. But that doesn't hit on the other parts of the paragraph. All right, World War II was the most destructive conflict in the history of the world. I hope by now we can understand that while that might sound like a decent way to start the paragraph, it does nothing to actually clue us into what the paragraph is specifically about. We need to be more specific. Your topic sentences cannot be that general or vague. All right. Secret codes are a very important way for armies to keep their plans out of enemy hands. Oh, that's part of what the paragraph is about too, but it doesn't touch on every element. Okay. Native American soldiers played a critical role in the Allied victory in World War II. Okay. Native American soldiers. That's just another way of referring to the Navajo. The paragraph tells us specifically, when we get into it, that we're looking at the Navajo Native Americans. Played a critical role. How did they play a critical role? With their language, which the paragraph explains, in the Allied victory in World War II. That gives us the context. That is the best topic sentence. It does not specifically mention each element word for word, but it does at least allude to each element of the paragraph so that we have an idea of what's in store for us. The other two that were somewhat okay, A and C, they made the focus too narrow. So if we're looking at A, the Navajo are a special people with a language unlike any other, that means all the stuff about World War II doesn't belong in the paragraph anymore. And the opposite, when we look at C, secret codes are a very important way for armies to keep their plans out of enemy hands. That takes everything else out of the paragraph as well. D is the only one that at least alludes to all of the elements so that it clues us into what the paragraph is going to be about, and all of the elements of the paragraph can stay. They are all included under the umbrella of that topic sentence. So that is a really good example of why a topic sentence needs to be well thought out and, not vague, but it doesn't always have to be, super specific as in word for word what the paragraph is going to be about. So something to keep in mind. We are going to work more on these with one of the homework assignments for this week. If you have any questions about topic sentences before you start working on the assignment, feel free to get in touch with me. If you have any questions still after you attempt the assignment, definitely, get in touch with me, and hopefully I can help you work through whatever you're struggling with. But you can go ahead and stop this video. The next video will go on to talk more about transitions and cohesion.